I know what you're thinking, not another 992 Gen 2 GT3 video, but this one's with a difference. For a start, we're in the UK, as you can see, and also Porsche wanted to get me behind the wheel of this, the GT3 with the touring package, but also the fixed-wing version with the Weissach package, and compare the two. Plus, they let me loose on a rather interesting track, more on that later. And besides, you can't have too many GT3 videos. That's like having internet that's too fast, or Pedro Pascal being in too many movies. It's just not possible. So, you're welcome. We picked an absolute stinker of a day to test drive this car, but there we go. First thing I want to do is just point out that I have a bit of a confession to make. I have a bit of a soft spot for a Porsche 911, and I don't say that lightly, because for a motoring journalist to say they have a favourite, you risk accusations of not being impartial, lack of neutrality. But I'll tell you for why, and everyone has a favourite, right? When I was growing up, my dad, 2 years old, bought himself a 1970 2.2 S. Beautiful burnt orange colour, very 1970s. And then he was a racing driver. He raced 911s, 928s, 924s. So Porsches have sort of been around my early life quite a lot. So I have a sort of natural affinity for a 911, and when I get in one, it's like I hear that flat six and that sort of oral quality that it's still got. The 3 dials on the dashboard, the look of the dash, it's like going home in some ways for me. So that aside, I mean, who's going to criticize a 911 GT3? I'll challenge you to find any video out there of someone saying a 911 GT3 is rubbish. That said, this car is not perfect. I have found a problem with it. The cup holder is right behind the gear lever. Bizarre place for a cup holder. There is one over there on the passenger side which pops out of the dashboard, which was always a much better solution. Really weird thinking from the engineers, but they did have other things on their mind.
What we've got is not merely a refresh, but a surgical enhancement of the engineering DNA. Under that rear lid sits the characteristic 4-litre naturally aspirated flat 6. Porsche has resisted turbocharging and hybridization once again, and yet the company has had to meet much stricter emissions requirements, and that has dulled the character a little. But the clever people at Porsche have ensured the engine still pumps out 503 brake horsepower and 332 pound-foot of torque. What's more, it retains its rev-happy character all the way up to a screaming 9,000 RPM. I won't go into all the engineering changes, read the press release if you want to know that, but there have been quite a few tweaks to the power plant's guts to make it all work.
So to compensate for having the engine's wings clipped a little bit, Porsche has changed the final drive ratio on this car, reduced it by 8%. That means effectively all of the gears are slightly low ratioed. That means you can get to max revs a little bit quicker. It means more gear changes at lower speeds, and that increases both the responsiveness, the feel of the speed of acceleration, but also the fact that you get to change gear a lot more. This car has the manual gear shift. That comes as standard in the touring package, but there's also a 7-speed PDK. Most motoring journalists will encourage you to get the manual. It's really up to you. The PDK is good, but for maximum engagement, obviously, manual's the way to go. So let's talk about the chassis. First of all, we've got multi-link rear suspension, and just like the 992 came before, still got double wishbones up front, F1 style, and the trailing arm teardrop shaped to help with downforce, if you can believe that, and cooling to the brakes. Very clever stuff. Aero changes, very subtle indeed, larger air intakes, new front diffuser. They've changed the underbody fins as well. And on this touring package, if you come around the back, they've obviously deleted the fixed rear wing. Instead, you get this extendable rear wing with a gurney flap and then some other changes to make sure that the balance is good at speed. But what you get is a classic 911 silhouette. It's really understated. It's like a stealth racing car for the road, and I absolutely love that. And Porsche has fitted this car with the Leichtbau Package, lightweight, which means you get magnesium wheels, carbon roof, carbon in the doors, and round the front, a carbon bonnet. And if you open it up and lift it up, it is as light as a fly's what's-it. The whole package weighs 1,420 kilos. And the other thing about the touring package is that you can have the option of rear seats for the first time in a GT3, and that gives you the option to bring your children with you in the car, which I did yesterday. And I have to say, the experience of driving a GT3 is greatly improved by not having pre-teens in the back, but also to allow them to get in and out of the car easier. The seats tilt forward, and these new seats are sensational, carbon backed, and hug you really, really well, but are super comfortable. There's no recline, but they do slide forwards and backwards, and you can go up and down. And as you might have seen in other videos, the headrests come out if you're wearing a helmet. So you've got that amazing sort of duality in this car: track capable, track focused, but also the practicality that you can take your kids with you somewhere. But as I say, don't do that. It feels fairly stripped back, but you've got these piano keys here, nose lift, and an assist button, which is really good. So you can switch off the speed warning, the lane keep assist, and the brake recommendations. Most people, I presume, will be doing that. Although I have to say, I haven't had any speed warnings. So either it's not working or I'm not trying hard enough. And the lane keep assist as well is not too much of an issue. And then other things I like: drive mode selection on the dash, switch it across to sport or track, and when you put it in track, you get the rev counter switches to having the 9,000 RPM redline at 12 o'clock. Other bits of practicality: you've got these door bins. They're not huge, but you can fit water bottles in there, and the cargo nets add a bit of flexibility, so they're actually pretty useful. And then obviously rear seats. I've seen a video by one of my favorite video presenters and also a very nice chap, Henry Catchpole, talks about the rear seats in the car, taking away some of the sound quality from the engine, because you've got an extra barrier between you and the power plant. You can actually, I've discovered, fold down the rear seats, and therefore you haven't got a problem anymore. In terms of driving feel, the steering has been adjusted. It's been recalibrated from the 992. That is also to help with it being a little bit fidgety around the off-center. It's a bit more linear now. People will complain about hydraulic versus electric power steering. This feels pretty good to me. And then the ride quality. I did have a Carrera T, which is brilliant, by the way. I actually prefer these seats, and that's old school in a way, but its suspension is less hardcore than this. The ride in this is pretty serious stuff. You can drive it on the road every day, but you just have to be aware that it is not a family hatchback. Yeah, this car is lively in the wet, I have to say. But the real plus point of this car is that naturally aspirated flat six behind, and it goes all the way to 9,000 RPM. Wow, it's slippy in this weather. Like, don't get me wrong, I like electric cars very much. And you can get some sporty electric cars now. I've just driven the Ioniq 6N. Nice bit of kit, but you cannot replicate that. And when it's gone, we're all going to be pretty sad, right? Other things they've done this time around, recalibrated the suspension to reduce the dive. So under braking, the way the car pitches gives it a bit more controllability on the brakes, but it's still got magnificent gear change. The clutch feel is absolutely superb. They didn't take from the ST the really hardcore racing clutch, and this car is all the better for it because it's very easy to drive. I'm not going to show off by putting a camera down in the pedal box to show you that I can heel and toe, but trust me when I say that if you can heel and toe, the pedals are in just the right position. It's absolutely magic. And I would talk about grip and poise. In this weather, it's pretty tricky. I have to say though, even in track mode, and even in this weather, this car is pretty approachable. It's not going to bite my head off unless I do something pretty stupid. I would say though that the noise in here is quite intense. You get on a motorway, there's quite a lot of tyre roar. Obviously there's a lot of noise from the engine. They've taken away some of the sound deadening that you might get in other 911s for obvious reasons. This is a performance car, so you get what you expect. Yeah, I'll be honest, I can't remember driving the old 992 on a road as bumpy as this, so I'm not going to try and give you a direct comparison in my head, but this car is pretty approachable but firm.
It was a shame that our drive on the road was so wet because it meant I was only able to treat the touring with kid gloves. I'll be honest, it was at times rather treacherous. I did notice the front wheels still want to follow camber and ruts, but I definitely got a sense of its incremental improvements and found its edges in these conditions. There's a hardcore nature, but it's not a terrifying machine if you're being sensible, and it's still a car you can find entertaining in the wet on UK roads. Most likely though, you'll want to keep such a precious thing dry if possible. Fortunately, our morning on track was just such a day.
So the 911 GT3 Touring is all about subtlety for the hardcore driver who likes to blend in as well, but maybe sometimes also wants to take their kids to the school run. But of course there is a GT3 that is purebred, one that loves smashing Nürburgring lap times and has a wing fixed to the back that is the size of a tabletop, and that's it. And this is my playground for the next 60 minutes, the Top Gear test track.
The GT3 turns from a brute in a suit to, well, just a brute. And the brakes, whoa, they're so strong. I mean, you try and find the braking points, they're much later than you think they're going to be. And this really is a ridiculous amount of fun for me. Not just because of the car, but also because of where we are. This is where Clarkson, Hammond and May did so much incredible stuff with Top Gear, and the guys afterwards, but let's concentrate on the main guys. And they drove 911 GT3s around here as well. They banged on a lot about the engine being in the wrong place, but ultimately they love this car, whichever generation it was. And I remember Clarkson particularly saying the 996 GT3 was a car that was the best car he'd driven all year, whichever year that was. It's about 100 years ago now. That rear wing isn't just for show, of course. Porsche doesn't talk about specific downforce from specific elements of the car, but it stands to reason that that fixed wing there is doing a lot more in pushing me into the tarmac than the retractable job on the Touring. But to balance things out, it's got a new front splitter and a new rear diffuser that helps create that awesome balance around this track. Though the suspension is the same as the 992 with those double wishbones at the front, which ensure that it's got awesome grip at the front end and a nose that just hunts the apexes, to use a motoring cliche. And it's here on track that you can really let that naturally aspirated 4-litre flat 6 sing. I was gonna say it's not a very loud car compared to some of the competition, but it really is. This is a noisy machine. And what's wonderful about the GT3 and Porsche is that they could have looked at the emissions regulations and gone, you know, we need to hybridize this, we need to add a turbo. But for this generation, they haven't. They've resisted, because adding a turbo or adding an electric motor to this thing would be like painting the Mona Lisa's hair green. Sure, it would stand out. It would be bold. It would be memorable. But it'd be ruining a masterpiece. Let's talk business. I have here the spec sheet for this 911 GT3 with touring package. The base price is £158,200. So that puts it into supercar territory. It's not cheap, and that's just the base price. Porsche, famously, options are pricey. So I'll run through some of them. This oak green metallic Neo, £3,235 for the paint. Obviously it comes with the rear seats, but if you want Isofix fastening system, that's £154 extra. The lightweight package, £29,223. So you can think, actually, adding a few things on adds a great deal of price. £203,714 for the car as driven today. That's a lot of money.
That is big money for sure. Think what else you could buy with that. But if you could get yourself on the list for one of these, which isn't at all certain, then knowing GT3s, you are not going to lose money.
So to sum up, the 911 Gen 2 GT3 is rubbish. Now, of course it's not, it's sublime. It's the result of generations of incremental updates, and the ones they've brought to this car from the old one are just adding a little bit of finesse, so just a little bit nicer on the steering, a little bit better on the bumps, and it's still got that naturally aspirated 4-litre flat 6 that is just sensational. So the question is which one you go for, whether it's the touring package, the fixed wing version, whether it's Leichtbau or Weissach. There are many options. Whichever one you go for though, trust me, it's brilliant.